just messing around with a lesson I just finished a couple days ago. Actually, just yesterday, now that I think about it. And it's interesting, really coincidental that a question came up this week. Oh, it is Friday, March 7th. Earlier in the day than I usually get to this because we're going away for a couple days. So heading down south to Cambria for a couple days. It's a little getaway vacation, Honey and I. Anyway, but a question came up on the... Well, wait, let me tell you about the new things that we had this week. First of all, Nesh put together a lesson on a Joe Walsh tune, Coincidentally, also done by the Eagles, because they were sort of in the habit of... Help Me Through the Night, by the way, is what it's called. And they were kind of in the habit of, a lot of the members of the band, at least Timothy Schmidt and Joe Walsh, and even Randy Meisner, came from other bands that people already knew. Now, Henley and Fry were kind of, the Eagles were kind of their first big thing after sort of getting their start with Linda Ronstadt. And some of the rest of those guys were, kind of, they sort of came together to back her up. And then they put the band together. But Joe Walsh, who of course joined much later. He wasn't there until Hotel California, I think. Yeah, because I think he replaced Bernie Ledden. But where I'm going with this, calm down, is they were in the habit of playing older songs by their artists. They probably even did this. At one point, maybe not. But Help Me Through the Night is a Joe Walsh tune from one of his solo albums, So What, that they did. And I think they did some Timothy B. Schmidt songs later on, maybe some Poco tunes. I have to research that a little bit. I don't think they did any of Meisner's tunes from his previous world, which was also included, of course, Poco. Anyway, so that was one of our new tunes, and a great example, especially the live. Well, they probably only did it live. I don't think they ever had a studio version. We had, one guitar in open G, and other guitars just kind of strumming normal chords. The other lesson was one that I had thought about for years, and I kind of thought, oh, there's just too much going on in this lesson. This is like too complicated. And then I thought, oh no, just put together a campfire version of it, just strumming the chords. We need an E and a B7. Anyhow, when I started listening to it a little more carefully a week or two ago, because of the multiple requests I've gotten for doing this over the years, I thought, let's add in let's really spice this up. Let's have a little talk on theory. I think the theory segment turned out to be 10 or 12 minutes. And about the relationship of the chords. The song modulates. It's played in two different keys and does something really unusual for songs that change keys. And that is, it goes from the key of E to the key of G, and then comes back and ends back in the key of E. Usually once you change keys, you don't do that. Like Lodi is an example that moves up. The Gambler, all these songs frequently move up to a higher key, a half step or a whole step. Woman, John Lennon, half step. Lodi is a whole step. The Gambler is a whole step as well. It goes from E to F sharp. Anyway, so once you crank it up to a different key, you don't usually bring it back. Although Morning Has Broken is an example of one that does exactly that, and that's because they kind of want to calm it down after they've cranked up the intensity. Went from the key of C to the key of D for the third verse, and he sings higher. It's way more intense, spine tingling when Cat Stevens is singing the third verse in Morning Has Broken. But they kind of want to give you a little softer landing back to earth. Anyway, in New Kid in Town, they start in E and then do the whole thing in G, which does crank up the intensity because the vocals are higher, and then they bring it back to E though to kind of calm it down as well. Anyway, so that lesson got a lot more complicated than I meant to, and I decided to throw in some of the fills and licks. Little keyboard, that's actually I think a keyboard part that happens at the beginning. It could be wrong, it might be the guitar, but the guitar answers that. And really coincidentally with the question that Barry put on the forum this week about double stops. Those are all double and triple stops, although on the guitar we don't use them. So I'm going to try to demystify the term here, because a lot of people hear the term double stops and think, oh my God, it's like modes. It's from a different universe. And modes really simply are just a I've gone into this way before, but to really simplify it, a mode is just a scale. Like a major scale is one mode, a minor scale is another mode, and there are 5 others related to those two that have all the Greek names, Lydian, Mixolydian, Dorian, stuff like that. But they're all just different patterns, different sequences of whole steps and half steps. Don't let that be too scary. Double stops, just as scary, but you've heard this. Double stop is as simple as playing 2 notes at the same time. Digest that. Now, that's a double stop with a bass note. Like we're hearing a D in the bass over a pair of notes that are, and what these have in common, the 2 I just played, what was the first one? Margaritaville. And the one we hear in Dance With Me, we're hearing notes that are a third apart. So we're just hearing harmony. We're just hearing 2 notes that blend together because they're thirds. And I've done all kinds of other, not so much lessons, but in some of these weekly updates, I've talked about playing thirds on the middle 2 strings. That was thirds in the key of G, starting with 2 open notes. Or on the top 2 strings in the key of C. Let's do it in D. Here would be the first third in D. It'd be a D and an F sharp, an E and a G, an F sharp and an A, G and a B, an A and a C sharp. So, the term comes from really bowed instruments, violins, cellos, even basses, where composers would start writing things, and you could relatively easily play 2 strings at a time on those bowed instruments. Not common, not really even possible to play 3 or 4 at the same time, but you can get that illusion by spreading them out a little bit because the strings are arched, or they're not flat like they are relatively on the guitar. Anyway, so a lot of times you hear 2 notes at a time in some kind of harmony. The couple I just played there are thirds. What else? In thirds we hear Brown-Eyed Girl sometimes in thirds and sometimes in inversions of it. What's another one? Oh, goes. That's it. Now, many times when you hear something like that in Ventura Highway, you're hearing 2 notes at a time. I was only playing partially 2. Sometimes I was only playing 1. So I wasn't making it as difficult as it would be if I did this. Right there. That's what it is. Anyway, when that was recorded, and many times in the studio, they have 2 different guitar players or 2 different guitar parts playing 1 note at a time, rather than the difficulty of playing something that moves quickly with pairs of notes. Now, so enough about Ventura Highway, but the Allman Brothers did a lot of this, where they've got 2 leads. While that's going on, there's another lead in harmony, not always playing the same intervals, sometimes thirds, sometimes sixths, sometimes fourths, even occasionally sometimes fifths, I think, in that one. I haven't thought about it for a long time. But anyway, so that's all there is to the idea of double stops. And the lesson I just put together on New Kid in Town uses some of those, but in the very beginning we hear 3 notes played together with a hammer on. Jimi Hendrix did a lot of this kind of stuff. 1 note moving with other notes ringing. Not a Hendrix tune, of course. So the idea is you just play 2 notes together. Sometimes they're on non-adjacent strings, but that wouldn't usually be the case with thirds. Anytime you're playing thirds on the guitar, they're going to be next to each other. They're going to be on adjacent strings. But here I'm going to go, let me see, I made a list of some songs that use different intervals in what we might call double stops. Now, we talked about, you heard Dance With Me does them in there, as does Margaritaville. So those are all thirds. Much more common, or very common too, is fifths, where we play things. A fifth is just a power chord. So if I played this, that could just be considered double stops because I'm just playing power chords, two notes that are a fifth apart. There are songs, I could play another one. Oh yeah. Except Smoke on the Water, the original guitar part that Ritchie Blackmore did, was inverted fifths. Instead of a G and a D, it was a D and a G. When you turn a fifth over, you end up with a fourth. So it sounds like power chords, but it's got a little different flair to it. Now, of course, then they had a bass part. Put together this very simple thing that is so cool and became one of the biggest tunes of all time. We've heard fourths and other things. Recognize that sound? Fourths. Let's see, I've talked about thirds, fourths. You don't usually hear tunes, intervals played in seconds. But you do, at the very beginning of the piano piece Chopsticks. Piano piece. That's what a second sounds like, two notes that are right next to each other. Sixths, though, which are inversions of thirds, I could play a C and an E here, and that's a third. But if I play the E an octave lower and play the E below it, I've got the same two notes. But we call this a sixth now because we measure intervals from the lower note. And where you've heard sixths in a lot of things. Peace Train, that's notes in, and with slightly different rhythm sometimes for both of them. Also a really common bluesy turnaround. Let me think about this. Turn around there was six. I was playing a B and a G sharp, half step low, B flat and G natural, A and F sharp, and then coming home to the G sharp and the E that are part of the E chord. Sometimes it's played in triplets. So I think that's the end of my story. Oh, no, I'm going to give you one more quick example. I've used this song of mine as an example of a few things before, so I'm only going to play a little bit of it. It's called One Step Beyond, and it has this main little riff that goes. Let me think, and then, it has a bunch of different parts. There we go. opens up with melody, just a single note. And now has a little harmony. We can call them double stops, except I'm playing bass notes at the same time. Now, most of those were thirds. We came home to fourths because it was to a pair of notes that were a fourth apart, because that's the notes I need for an E chord. Then it goes into parallel fourths, also, which are inverted thirds, fourths, fifths. Try it again. Fourths are two notes on the same fret of adjacent strings other than the third and second string. So that's what I'm doing here, is playing notes on the fourth and third strings. Then a fifth that are two frets apart. Then it goes into a part with the harmony in sevenths. Pretty dissonant, but listen to what it sounds like with the bass. Ends with fifths. Gotta let you off the hook. It does repeats. And after all that dissonance, we hear a major seventh and a minor seventh. Again, got to get calmer. Repeating that major seventh. So what we're hearing up there is a C and a B, but it doesn't seem really dissonant. It seems pleasant because of the other notes in there. Anyhow, I think that's all I have to say about that today. I got to get on the road, and hope you enjoy I hope you got something out of this. Talking about double stops. Don't be afraid of them. It just means playing two notes at a time, and in some kind of harmony. There are lots of songs that use them. I think I talked about maybe more than a half a dozen today. Let's see. Oh, I did mention last week that I was going to be in Phoenix on the 12th. I'm not. It's the 19th. So if you're in the Phoenix area, Phoenix. That's the other place that I got to get with it. That's the other place where I've gone to Guitar League things. Palm Desert near Palm Springs and Indian Wells on Wednesday the 19th. So that is coming up. Don't go to Phoenix. Well, this is a good time of year probably to go there, but I'm not going there yet. Okay, I will. That's a wrap for today. I will be back with more ramblings next week.